Welcome back to American Government and Politics. This is Professor Jonathan Day. In this lecture, we're going to be looking at interest groups. So the first thing to understand about interest groups is that they run into what's called the collective action problem. This is a famous problem in political science and sociology and other disciplines. And it happens when the members of a group want the benefits of an action, but do not want to share in the cost of that action. Each person wants something done and wishes others would do it for them. The reason is that person would receive the benefit without the cost of doing the action. When everyone thinks this way, then nothing gets done. So a great example of this is think about, for example, a house shared by a bunch of family members or college students, and there's dirty dishes everywhere, right? Maybe there's trash, right? These things need to be done. But each person walks by those dishes and walks by that trash and goes, I would love for this to be done, cleaned up, but it would be nice if someone else were to do it. But then when everyone walks by and says that, then the dishes never get done and the trash never gets put away. This is what's called the collective action problem. And this is actually what happens why things don't get done in society, is when we run into the collective action problem. But interest groups, groups that are formed to take care or want to push a particular issue are not able to be formed either, right? Because each person wants there to be a group that sort of pushes for an interest, but they don't want to pay the money or the time in order to form that interest group or to keep it going. So how are interest groups formed and maintained given this problem? Well, there's this benefits from participation. So some people actually do enjoy the work, right? Some people enjoy cleaning up the house, right? Some people enjoy forming interest groups. They get solidarity benefits, benefits from working with like-minded people, or purposive benefits from working to achieve a desired goal. And so there are some people out there who really do actually get the joy of actually working and participating in these things. So that's one way that interest groups can be formed and maintained. Another way is through coercion. So, for example, you can require participation. Now, there used to be an example that I used with unions and paying union dues, but the Supreme Court had struck that down a few years ago. And so the example right now is government, right? In order for the government to be formed and maintained, it requires a level of coercion, right? It forces that participation within the government through taxes and through punishments if you don't do what the laws require of us. Selective incentives are another example of this, or another reason why interest groups can be formed and maintained. So material benefits can be offered to you by the interest group, but only if you join the group. And then finally, entrepreneurs are persons who fund or start an interest group because they strongly believe in the mission of an interest group. And so you might get a really wealthy person who puts out millions and millions and millions of dollars in order to form and maintain an interest group for the long term. So who normally forms an interest group? Well, the answer to this is, if you think about it, right, it requires time and it requires money. And the groups that have this ability to form an interest group are also the groups that can get the most success out of having an interest group, and those are wealthy people and business owners, right? So businesses generally form lots of interest groups because they can get legislation to lower the regulations and restrictions on their businesses, but also provide tax incentives in order to promote the buying of their services and so forth. An example of this is like the National Realtors Association. The realtors are able to get the government to provide tax benefits for buying houses, and therefore more people buy houses and they make more money. And so because of this has a huge impact on policy influence, because if the wealthy people and business owners are the ones who most likely are the ones to form interest groups and to persuade government, we're going to get a lot of policies that are in the interest of businesses and wealthy people. Okay. So how do interest groups then influence policy at the government level? Well, there's some inside strategies and there's some outside strategies. So first, some inside strategies, right? So interest groups can help draft legislation. Legislation is incredibly complex, involves lots of legalese language, and it's really difficult for Congress people to even begin to write something like that or have the time to do something like that. And so interest groups offer to draft legislation up for congresspersons, and then they can write it exactly how they want it, and they give it to the congresspeople to use. They can also help write regulations. Bureaucratic officials have to write regulations based upon legislation about how they're going to enforce the laws. And interest groups can help those bureaucratic officials figure out a way to best write the regulations to enforce that legislation. Interest groups also provide research to congresspeople when they're engaged in their hearings and their public debates about drafting a particular legislation. Interest groups can make sure that their congressperson is very informed about the issue so that they look good on television. They also can help provide congresspeople with expert testimony. So they can pay for scientists and doctors and whoever else, celebrities, to come out and testify on behalf of a piece of legislation. Interest groups can also sponsor legal action. They can help with legal bills or help pay for lawyers to write amicus curiae briefs, which are arguments in favor of a particular side on a court issue. And so the interest groups have a lot of inside strategies to influence policies at the government level. They also have a number of outside strategies too. For example, grassroots lobbying is where an interest group can get its members to send email, make phone calls, and send letters. So if an interest group has lots of members, they can tell them to please go and write your congressperson, and then they will be able to sort of influence that congressperson to vote a particular way or support or oppose a particular bill. And because if the congressperson thinks that their constituents are really in favor or really in opposition of that, they know that if they don't support their constituents, they might be ousted in the next election. There's also a thing called AstroTurf lobbying. So if interest groups don't have a lot of members, but they have a lot of money, they can create templates and pay people to write a whole bunch of emails and make phone calls to make it look like there's a lot of support or opposition to a particular bill. And that's what's called AstroTurf lobbying. AstroTurf basically means fake grass. Make it look like there's big opposition or support for a bill. A third one is mobilizing public opinion. Interest groups can pay for advertisements and make phone calls to people to try to get them to support or oppose a particular bill. They can engage in electioneering, which means that they can donate money to candidates to help them get elected who will support their interest. They can also form media contacts. So when an interest group can reach out to the media, particularly during key events that might promote their interest, and get the free publicity that comes with that in order to promote their interest. And then finally, when are interest groups successful? Well, there's two major factors here. The first is salience. So when an issue salience means is how well known is the issue within the public. And so when an issue does not attract public attention, it is easier for the interest group to persuade Congress to pass the desired legislation. The other one is conflict. So when there is nobody speaking against an issue, there's no other interest groups against a particular issue, it is easier for an interest group to push their goals to Congress. So if there's low salience, not a lot of people know about it, and low conflict, not a lot of people are opposed to it, then that's when an interest group is going to be most successful. A great example of this, as we end this lecture, is the National Turkeys Association, who promotes the selling of turkeys from their turkey farmers, was able to successfully get more turkey into turkey sandwiches at school lunches to get the government to promote that, because not a lot of people knew that that was an issue, and not a lot of people were opposed to children getting more turkey on their turkey sandwiches. All right, that is interest groups. Thank you very much.